Hello, I'm Dave Shields, coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Kenosis Counseling Center. Today we're going to talk about the 7 myths uncovered about social anxiety disorder. It's important to talk about these myths because these are common misunderstandings that often prevent somebody struggling with social anxiety disorder from getting the kind of care that they truly need. Myth number 1, social anxiety disorder is rare. This is a myth. Social anxiety disorder is the 3rd most commonly diagnosed mental health disorder in the United States. It impacts 8 to 9% of the United States population. It's probably a little bit higher than that because so many folks hide that struggle with social anxiety disorder and don't seek treatment. And so it's much more common than you might think. Myth number 2, social anxiety and nervousness are the same thing. This couldn't be further from the truth. Social anxiety disorder is chronic. It is happening throughout most of the day, every day. It is impacting. Social anxiety is severe, it's chronic, and it's debilitating. Nervousness comes and goes, whereas social anxiety is a constant daily struggle. It can impact work days or school days. It can impact going out into public for groceries or to see a friend. It can impact being online and obsessing about what somebody may be thinking about you if you're in a group chat or if you're in a forum. And that stress gets high enough that you begin to avoid those things that you can avoid. You look for any and all, and you get very creative around finding ways to avoid things like going to school or going to work. You may miss a lot of work. You may miss a lot of school if you're still in school. And there is some ways you can begin to see how this disorder becomes debilitating. Myth number 3. Social anxiety disorder is only a fear of public speaking. Now, public speaking is one of the greatest fears that we have in our culture. Just about everybody at some point in their lives have been afraid of public speaking. And certainly social anxiety disorder folks are terrified of public speaking. But it doesn't stop just there. The core fear of a social anxiety disorder person is the fear of being judged. They have an intense fear around embarrassment, that they're going to say or do something where they'll be horribly embarrassed and then humiliated. And so it doesn't just happen in public speaking events. It happens where there's any possibility of interaction with any other person. They can be out shopping. They can be at the drive-through window of a restaurant. They can be out in public at a bar with friends. It can be with those friends at the bar or somebody else at the bar that they feel like someone's staring at them. It can be in school settings where they're divided up into groups and they're obsessing in that group about other kids and how they might be thinking about them. And so it goes on and on. So the disorder bridges that anxiety into all facets of life and into any interaction with other folks. Myth number 4, socially anxious folks should just get over it. And so you've probably heard that in one way or another somewhere out there in the world. You probably have said the same message to yourself at some point in your struggle with social anxiety. And it really stems from a complete misunderstanding of the disorder. Somebody who would say that shows an ignorance of the problem itself. And we have a great misunderstanding in our culture surrounding social anxiety disorder. Folks need to become more educated about this disorder so there's not so much stigma, so there's not so much of a misunderstanding around this disorder. If there was a better understanding by you, if you're struggling, if there was a better understanding by those surrounding you as your support system, it would be much easier to seek treatment. You may have experienced those kind of comments. And when you do, and you know you're struggling, it can be very hurtful. And it can distance you even further, and it can isolate you even further than you already are. Myth number 5. Social anxiety and shyness are the same thing. Now, I can see why folks would think that, but there's a lot of differences between somebody who's socially anxious and somebody who's simply shy. Somebody who's shy will be shy around kids at school on the first day of school. They will be shy in going out on a friend date with your mom and other kids and their moms. They will be shy around reading when they're picked on in class to read for a class assignment. They will be shy around giving a classwork assignment in front of the class. But when they're not in those situations and they're back at home, or they're just sitting in class, or they're out on the playground, those kids are normal. They're not worried. They're not preoccupied. They're just in their natural disposition when they're at home, when they're in other activities, and when they're just sitting around. And so that's a big difference, because if you have social anxiety disorder, when you're not in those situations, you're preoccupied with those situations. You're obsessed about and obsessing about the next event that you're due for, whether that's a speech in class or a speech at college that you have to give, or a work presentation that you're up for, and you're obsessing usually about how badly it's going to go, making predictions in your mind about how embarrassed and humiliated you're going to be, and about some way that you could possibly get out of it and nominate somebody else to do the presentation. And you do this with every interaction or event that's upcoming. And it is exhausting to you to live this way. It's no way to live, but it is the difference between shyness and social anxiety disorder. Shy kids don't have this kind of obsessing. They don't suffer in this way. They're simply shy. And they typically will get over that shyness. They may be introverted for the rest of their lives and may be different than extroverts. But they don't suffer from social anxiety disorder. I think one common misconception is that shy kids are socially anxious. That's not necessarily true. However, a lot of socially anxious folks are introverts. So it's interesting. Myth number 6. Socially anxious folks are antisocial. This is a belief or a myth about socially anxious folks that I could see why somebody might think that. Another myth that kind of goes along the same lines as this one is that socially anxious folks are arrogant, or that they snub people. And I could see why all of those things might be things that folks would think about somebody who's socially anxious. They're simply not true. Socially anxious folks are oftentimes lonely and yearn for fellowship. They're just locked up in a sort of prison established by social anxiety, and the thoughts that social anxiety inserts into their brain used to control them and keep them obsessing about how badly social interactions are going to go. And so they would like to break out of that. They would like to be more social. They would like to have friends. They would like to go on dates. They would like to have a spouse. They would like to even have a family. But a lot of socially anxious folks who don't seek help end up not having a lot of friends, end up dating very seldomly, and often will not have children if they don't get help. And so because they don't put in the steps required to develop fellowship, friendship, dating relationships, courtships, and the things needed to grow a family down the road. And so that is the cost of not getting help if you're socially anxious. You don't have to be socially anxious. You can get well from this disorder. I've been in practice 32 years. My wife is a renowned expert in social anxiety, and she's helped probably by now around 1,000 folks reclaim their life. And so you don't have to live inside this prison any longer. So back to the myth, socially anxious folks are not antisocial. They're just suffering. And so hopefully you can view them in a new light. I will say, on the other hand, that socially anxious folks are typically very good listeners. And as such, they're also very trustworthy. And so you can often go to them and they will listen very well to you. And they will also be very trustworthy with the information you give to them. They will keep it in confidence. And that's a couple of strengths that they really have in spades. And finally, myth number 7. Socially anxious folks are just in a phase. And this is a dangerous myth. It's not true. They're not just in a phase. They will not just grow out of it. And I'm talking a lot right now to parents. If you feel like you've got a kid that's just shy, or that you got a kid that you're just saying, well, he's in a phase, she's in a phase, they'll just grow out of it. Socially anxious folks don't just grow out of this. This gets worse. It stays with them for years. A study done by the Anxiety and Depression Association of America showed that 36% of social anxiety sufferers will suffer for 10 plus years before seeking help. That is over a decade of suffering before somebody steps forward and asks for help. And so if you're listening to this video today, and you know somebody who has a kid who's suffering, please share this video. It's important to know about, educate yourself about social anxiety, and get the kind of treatment that you need so that you can move past this disorder and start to claim the kind of life that you deserve to have. And so in that study, they found out that a lot of folks don't get help that need help. And we know also that social anxiety starts in the mid-teen years most often, but can start as early as age 6 to 8. And so I know that I struggled with social anxiety and had to work hard in therapy and other things to move beyond it. But I was socially anxious as young as age 6 and 7. And so it started for me very early. And I did not get help until I was in my early 20s. And so you don't have to wait any longer. If you're struggling, help is all around you. There's therapists, there's online forums, there's Reddit, Quora, Facebook groups. There's a lot of support groups around you. There's a lot of free information online to educate yourself. We work with folks at Kenosis. We work with folks live, by phone, and by video chat. And so reach out to us if you haven't reached out to anyone yet. We can help you. We have 12 expert therapists on hand. And if you want live sessions and you're not listening to me locally in Indianapolis, we will find somebody for you. And it's important to us that you find that kind of help that you need. And so we're willing to do whatever it takes to help you. But you have to take that first step and make contact. And so the final myth, myth 7, it's not just a phase. You can't just grow out of it. A lot of folks suffer for a long time before they reach out for help. You can do it now. You can reach out for help now. I encourage you to do so. If you thought this video was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up below. And please subscribe. I'm going to be making more videos about anxiety in general and also some more about social anxiety. And so that's it. God bless.